Today in the Magnus Carlsen Invitational tournament, we had the numbers 1 and 2 in the world facing each other. Magnus Carlsen against Fabiano Caruana. Things are nicely set up because, in fact, they were sharing the lead going into this round. So, well, all eyes on this one. And I'm going to take you through game 1. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, and do consider supporting us on PayPal or patreon.com PowerPlayChess. Right, Fabiano Caruana with the white pieces in this first game, and we've got an Alekhine's defense from Magnus. Well, this is really interesting because we've seen him play kind of serious openings with black so far against the e4 in this tournament. Sicilian, and you know, meeting his opponents with theory. But now he's gone back to the Alekhine's defense, which is a rare guest at top level tournaments, but is an opening that Magnus likes to use a lot in blitz chess when he's playing online. We saw it in his match against Alireza Firouzja. Not with notable success, but anyway. So why is he playing this? Well, Fabiano is, of course, excellently prepared. And this is like a bit of a slice serve. He's trying to get Fabiano out of his preparation. And also, it's a tricky opening. You invite white forward. And I think particularly with chess with a faster time control, this is risky because white has to go forward, has to keep the initiative, but if it goes wrong, then you leave this huge gap behind this pawn that black can try and exploit. So that's the rationale behind it. Will it work? Well, I have a feeling that on a kind of any normal day of the week, Fabiano would play knight f3 here. That's sensible, you know, bring a piece out. Has a good reputation, but he went for it, playing the so-called 4 pawns attack, and that is really uncompromising because, as I said, if it goes wrong, then there's a huge gap behind those pawns. And here the main line is to take on e5. Carlsen did something very unusual. He played pawn to g6, so this really is provocative. You're not challenging this huge pawn center yet. And again, bishop e6, wow, incredibly provocative. But it looks, looking this up afterwards, it looks like Magnus has kind of done a little bit of homework here. This has been seen before. Now, it looks absolutely crazy to invite white to push again. This is like a really extreme version of the opening. But in fact, if white does this didn't happen, then you can see that this pawn is really coming under fire. And if white has to take, then in fact, this is just fine for black because that bishop is just streaking across the board. That pawn would rather be on f2. That's absolutely fine. So d5, probably not a very good move. It reminds me a little bit of some Grunfeld positions where you invite white's pawns forward, but then you hit out from the side at them. So bishop e6, the knight and bishop, well, they sort of threaten that pawn. In fact, Fabi just brought the knight out. If that's taken, then there's actually a check on a4, and that's good for white. So let's come back. So black castled instead. And now there is a threat to take here. And once again, d5 not very good because of bishop g4. So therefore b3, pawn to b3 to protect the pawn. And Carlsen exchanges on e5. Now, if f takes e5, again, we have a classic kind of situation where Black is able to undermine those pawns by playing c5. And it really is reminiscent of the Grunfeld, where you can see this e5 pawn comes under enormous pressure here. The knight can come out as well. It's better for Black already. So that's why in this position, after d takes e5, Fabiano recaptured with the d pawn. Knight c6. Now, how does White cope with this position? Basically, at the moment, this pawn looks very nice. This pawn blocks in the bishop on g7. The pawn on c4 is well supported and prevents the knight on b6 from coming into the game. So these pieces are locked out of the game. However, Black has an idea to play f6, which, well, White would probably have to exchange that off. And then that bishop is working. And then, well, you have to see that White is behind in development. So this is actually quite tricky. So knight e4, and Fabiano wants to meet that by attacking this bishop. But in fact, although this looks very, very dangerous for Black, queen c8, simple move, guards the bishop, guards the pawn on b7. So White exchanged on f6. And bishop takes f6. I mean, it would be impossible to hold that pawn on e5. And, well, we've had a transformation of the position over the last few moves. White's pawn center has disappeared, and that bishop comes into play. This bishop on e6 also looks okay. I know it could be exchanged off, but White's king is still in the middle, and White is 2 moves away from castling. Now, if, let's say, rook c1, then White risks a great deal here because e5 suddenly opens up the position. I mean, at the very least, Black will not be worse here. So what did Fabi do? Well, he just left that rook in the corner. Bishop e2. And if that's taken, then the dark squares around the king are weak. So interesting decision from Fabi. He races to get his king to safety with bishop e2. Rook d8 from Magnus, hitting the queen, which came to the side, and bishop f5. So bishop on an excellent diagonal. Whoops, I misfired there. That rook still attacked. And Fabiano still refusing, well, he can't save it anyway by this stage. Again, very interesting decision now from Magnus. Instead of taking that rook, he looks at his worst placed minor piece, which is the knight on b6. That's doing nothing. Now, you mustn't leave any of your pieces behind. And he played knight d7. It's a good move. Exchanges off the powerful knight on c5 and gets rid of that knight on b6, or redeploys the knight on b6. If the knights are exchanged, then Black seems fine. So Fabiano decided to play knight d3. By leaving the knight on d7, it keeps Black's pieces a little bit clogged up. And now Magnus decided, right, the time has come to take that rook, because he can bring that knight across to f6 to close that diagonal. So you can see, again, it's a kind of magical transformation in the position over the last few moves. That knight on b6 doing nothing, and now it finds a proper defensive role on f6. So we have a very unbalanced position where Caruana is a clear exchange down, but he does have compensation in the form of the 2 bishops. But Magnus's position is certainly not bad here, because there is decent communication between Black's pieces, the queen, and the king side. And it's hard to see how White is going to launch an attack on Black's king for the moment. But bishop d4 is a good start, so the queen and bishop form a battery on the long diagonal. So Magnus plays knight d7 to exchange off that powerful knight on e5. Good decision. And now h3 from Caruana. So sometimes prevents bishop g4, but also just gives his king a little bolt hole on h2. So it's absolutely safe there. Carlsen exchanges. So he's got rid of that powerful knight, that impressive knight on e5, but it's been replaced by a bishop. And of course, this kind of move comes into consideration with a follow-up of queen g7 mate. But actually, black has surprising resources here. Anyway, Carlsen played c6. So that prevents a pawn being taken, that's one thing. But also it's useful because it means that this bishop doesn't have any scope on this diagonal. Queen c3, solid move. That prevents bishop d3, which in some circumstances, could lead to favourable exchanges, and prepares to swing the queen over to the danger zone on the king side. h5, really interesting move. It takes guts to move a pawn up in front of your king, which is already a little bit exposed, but sometimes g4 is possible, so it prevents that. And actually, Magnus understands that he has resources for the king. Sometimes the king can even just come to h7, but as we'll see, sometimes it can come to f7 as well. And here, I think a reasonable way for white to play would be c5, with the idea of bringing the bishop out here. Now, black should not be too greedy here. I think the best thing to do is basically give back the exchange, and you can do that in a couple of ways. Either just rook d5 immediately, just sit the rook there, allow it to be taken, or b5, and again, rook d5. And play is, balanced. I still would slightly prefer white in this position, because I think white's king on h2 is a little bit safer than black's. But then again, neither king particularly safe, because there might be possibilities to attack on the second rank as well for black. But I think it's roughly balanced. I think that's white's best. But instead, Caruana played rook e1. So he's trying to get some more from these bishops, basically. King f7. And again, c5 is still possible, but queen g3. So Caruana looking to come in here. But actually, I think that was a bad decision. So after rook d2, black is getting serious counterplay on the second rank. And the thing is, if this queen goes in, it actually doesn't have that much effect, because, let's say rook d8 supporting this one. If the queen goes in, the king can just run away. If there's a check, it just, whoops, that's misfired yet again. Queen h8 check, the king just bounces up to d7. So let me see, bishop f3 played by Fabiano, which looks pretty solid, protecting the pawn on g2. But then again, that is a quite annoying pin. Queen g5, rook d8. So the rooks supporting each other, looking good. And here already, I think Caruana's position is quite dubious. It's clear that Magnus his initiative is really growing. So, for example, if king h2, then it's possible just to sack back the exchange. And in this position, there's no doubt that white's king is much worse than black's, much more insecure than black's king, which, as I've said before, could, if necessary, bounce around here. But actually, white has to fall back on the defensive here. And I think because the third and second ranks are exposed, black is definitely better there. In the game, Caruana played king f2. Wow. That is really risky. Because, you know, you bring your king out into the open and somehow Fabiano's sense of danger just lost him for a moment here. And here, rook d2 check is very strong. The king came up, but I'm afraid this is no hiding place. Rook number 2 came in, and wow, this is looking really nasty. Queen h6, that is really a forlorn hope, because bishop takes h3 was absolutely crushing. And here, white has just gone completely. If pawn takes bishop, well, black can choose which way he wants to take white apart. But okay, the quickest way is like this, and checkmate on d3. That's one of my favorite types of checkmates. I love this geometry here, and the queen gets the king. But also, if you want to be flash, and hey, why not? You can checkmate like this, and then rook g3, that'll do as well. So bishop h3 just rips through white's position, and well, king h4 played, and that was the final move of the game. Rook takes g2. It's just completely gone here. Checkmates, all kinds of checkmates threatened here. And of course, checking does absolutely no good at the other end of the board, because the king just creeps out to d7 and is completely safe. So what a crushing victory for Magnus in that first game. And I have to say, he played really convincingly in this match. And I'm afraid it had echoes of the World Championship tiebreak in 2018, where Magnus really dominated Fabiano in those games. And yeah, Fabiano might be number 2 in the world, I think, very clearly on the rating list. But in speed chess, yeah, at the moment it seems like he can't match Magnus. Thanks for watching.